So, hello and welcome to First Impressions, our debut episode. This is a show where my co-host Dash Hooper and I evaluate a new album each week with a few simple ground rules. First, it must be an album we've never heard before. Second, we're only allowed to play it once. After that, we rate it in a variety of categories. And before we started, both of us picked 10 albums from any time, any genre. And the first album we're going to be looking at tonight is Songs of a Lost World, the new album by The Cure. So, Dash, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing excellent. Thank you, Ed. Glad to be on here for the show.
Yeah. So this is exciting. We picked our albums, and I'm going to have to say one thing that I really, even though we're only starting on this, one thing that I really found enjoyable was just sitting down and listening to an album, and that's the only thing you're doing. You have one simple focus, because so many times I experience new albums while I'm driving in the car, while I'm going out on a run, and just being able to sit there and listen to an album, and that's the only agenda you have. I found that to be such a fun thing to do. So especially looking at lots of new stuff where you get to that chance to make a first impression with an album that you haven't listened to. So that was something that I didn't realize how exciting it would be to just sit down and experience an album.
Yeah, listen, when you first suggested this, I was like, man, I haven't heard The Cure in, obviously we're going to talk about it here in a little bit, but I haven't heard The Cure since I was in high school for the most part.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I didn't even know they were coming out. So when I sat down with this, the 80s and 90s came back real quick for me.
Mm-hmm.
Made me feel young. It made me feel young again. So yeah.
So kind of getting ahead of ourselves, because we both have been talking a little bit about it. And yeah, so before we look at it, we have a variety of categories, like I said. And the first thing we're going to do is just kind of do the quick history of the band, like one paragraph history of The Cure. I mean, you can do, I know there's a podcast I listen to called Bandsplain, and Bandsplain does, I think, 6 hours on the history of The Cure. So we're doing, the super Cliff Notes version of the history of the band, and I'll give that to you right now. So The Cure were formed in 1976, which both of us didn't realize that they had been around quite so long, in Crawley, England, by Robert Smith. So Robert Smith is the one person in The Cure that has been there since the beginning. The lineup has changed multiple times over all the years and all the albums, but they're one of the most influential bands in alternative rock and goth rock, because when you think of goth, you probably think of Bauhaus, you may think of Joy Division, you definitely think of The Cure, their look, their sound. If you went to high school in the 80s or 90s, you knew the goth kids, and they were, playing all The Cure. So their early sound was shaped more like post-punk. So if you listen to their 1976 album, you can hear more of the post-punk Joy Division influence in there, and a lot of new wave as well. But as they developed, they kind of created that goth sound that we know and recognize today. And you recognize that with the melancholy lyrics, atmospheric soundscapes, and then those kind of haunting vocals that they put in there, sometimes with a lot of echo effects and things like that. Their breakthrough album in goth was Pornography, which was released in 1982. And that was followed in 1989 by the one that most people associate with them, and that's Disintegration. That's, generally considered their masterpiece. They even said on South Park, that Disintegration is the greatest album ever. So it's recognized as their top, and probably their albatross too, because now anytime a new album's released, you hear the best album since Disintegration. Is that saying the album's good, or that everything that's come after Disintegration has been crap and this is just slightly better? But we'll talk about that when we actually dig into this album. So they had a lot of success in the 80s and 90s, and they were actually able to kind of straddle the goth rock and pop rock scene. They had hits just like Heaven, Boys Don't Cry, Love Song, that were huge hits on radio. And then their sound is involved. They've had psychedelic influences. They've done more experimental things. So if you listen to their catalog, you can hear huge amounts of different things in there. And they've continued to tour. I saw them last year, in fact. So they're still out there. They're touring. and they were introduced into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019. So they had been kind of overlooked for years on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they finally got in there in 2019. So how has this album been reviewed? I went into Metacritic, and if you know what Metacritic is, it's kind of like Rotten Tomatoes, where they compile all the different reviews from the critics. But this one, unlike Rotten Tomatoes, which is exclusively for movies and television, this was movies, television, music, anything you can think of. They put that into the Metacritic. And on Metacritic, I'm going to pull it up real quick, you can see it's got a 93% Metacritic score. So that means it's got generally very strong ratings. When I was searching all the different reviews, I was hard pressed to find a negative review of the album. So if you look, The Guardian gave it 100%, so 10 out of 10, 4, 5 stars, whatever it may be. The Independent UK, another 100%. Telegram, Uncut, 80. You go to the 90s, 88. Consequence of Sound, 83. Pitchfork gave it a 79. Rolling Stone gave it, actually it was a 7.9 because Pitchfork has weird decimal ratings. And then Rolling Stone gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So generally very well received across the board. That, that dreaded tag, best album since Disintegration, has popped up through multiple reviews that I was reading when I was going through everything. So that's definitely, still going to be what you hear whenever The Cure puts out a good album, is best album since. And, we'll read that over and over again. So overall, extremely positive reviews.
Yeah, so 7.9. Yeah, 7.9 was the lowest I found as well.
And that's Pitchfork. And if you've read Pitchfork, it's like they are so weird with their ratings. And it's 7.9. But if you read the review, they were saying a lot of really good things about it. But Pitchfork, if you get a 7.9, you're like 8.0s where they kind of rate things in best new music. So it was almost there. And I'm guessing it'll still make their top 100 list at the end of the year. So with Pitchfork, it's tricky. Rolling Stone, 4 out of 5, which is kind of like their standard, unless they're calling it an all-time classic. And Rolling Stone's infamous, if you go through their reviews, for revising and tweaking them later on. Because I know when I was in high school, I'd spend our library had all the Rolling Stone archived years from the very beginning on microfiche. So you could dig out the little reels and read all those reviews, and they trashed some albums that they now call their all-time greatest. So it's kind of funny if you can find those original reviews, because they don't put them on the website. They don't want to share that they weren't, they didn't love the album from the start. So we'll see if this one is one of those ones that gets a revisionist, review later on, and they go, okay, never mind, it's an all-time classic. But 4 out of 5 is definitely not a bad review. That's kind of right where the Pitchfork one is, because that would put it at 80% if you're doing it on the percentage weight. So So now let's talk about, what's your background with The Cure? What do you think about, and have any kind of history with them? Oh, looks like we might have lost him right now. So while we're waiting on Dash to get back in here, let me talk about my history with The Cure. So The Cure is a band that I've been listening to since the 80s, kind of like we talked about, or like I talked about earlier, those hits that they had. I remember those. I remember hearing them on the radio. It wasn't until the later 90s that I really started digging deeper into their catalog, listening to some of the stuff that's not their big mainstream radio stuff. And they're a band I've seen now about 10 times live. One good thing about The Cure, if you go see them live, they play huge sets. We're talking 3-hour sets each time, no intermission. They just play all the way through. And Robert Smith's voice is as good as it ever was. So you go see him live, he's hitting all the notes just as good as anything. So they're a band I really love. I enjoy. I also love, one thing about them is that he's become kind of this new crusader against overpriced concert tickets and this whole platinum ticket bullshit that goes on. He's out there fighting against it. So when The Cure played their last tour, if you got the cheap seats, they were $25. if you wanted to go sit in the lawn at an amphitheater up at the very top of an arena, $25 for the tickets. And then he actually went and fought Ticketmaster again
Yep.
when
Yep.
they overcharged on the fees. And he said, you know what? These fees are ridiculous. It's a $25 ticket and you had $18 of fees. This is bullshit. Fix it. And made Ticketmaster send refunds to everybody that had bought tickets. And someone like that, there's most of the bands of that era are the cash grab. They're on their cash grab tour. And it's official platinum, and it's, you know, $800 for a good seat. And for them, the most expensive seat's going to be $100. The cheapest one's going to be $25, and you're not going to overpay in fees. So I just love that he's still out there, and he could do a cash grab tour. They could charge $300-400. People would still pay. But the fact that he's not doing it, and he kept the merchandise cheap, $25 t-shirts, $50 hoodies, because he said, we don't need this money. We're making so much profit. How dare a band charge $60 for shirts or anything like that? So I love that he's out there fighting against all the nonsense of those other 80s and 90s bands that are, you know, let's just, you know, cash in on the nostalgia. So what's your background with the band?
Well, we said 70s, 80s. Like I'm child of the 70s and 80s, but, you know, graduated in the 90s. The early 90s, and so this was like our school songs, our school dance songs, you know, Just Like Heaven and Love Song, obviously. But some of my favorites, Lullaby, Pictures of You, a lot of the ones that are probably not played on the, I guess now oldie station, but you know, again, you nailed it right there on the head. Is when I was growing up in the 80s, this was, you know, The Cure to me was always a rock band. It wasn't obviously until I got in the 90s that I really understood what the goth and all that meant. They were a rock band. So that's with me. And you know, you sent Love Song to your girlfriends and when you made your mixtapes or whatever, your Love Song was definitely on there. And you nailed it right on the head when you said that he's 65 years old and you would not be able to tell that from his voice nowadays. I mean, but you know,
it's as sharp as ever.
Strong
it's
voice me again.
So his voice is as good as it's ever been, and he just he's out there firing on all cylinders still. All right, so now and kind of talked about the history. Oh, sorry, go ahead. So we've talked about the history.
I was just going to say that we're good. We're good. Go ahead. Keep going.
Okay. So we've talked about the history of the band. We've kind of talked about our background. Robert Smith, there's him from the last tour that they played. And they actually did a show when this album was released where they played the album in its entirety and then played a huge chunk of other material. So he's still out there. He's still touring. I know they're planning a huge world tour to support this album. So they're still out there doing their thing. So now we're going to talk about our overall thoughts on this album. So Dash, you want to go first?
Sure. Listen, again, I got the 80s, 90s vibes the minute the first song started playing, and Alone is one of the very first songs on there, or it is the very first song on side A. If you've got the LP, you know, which is fantastic listening to on LP. I won't listen to any other way. But my first impressions were Bring Me Back Home, and it did. It brought me back to 70s or 80s and 90s. And you know, you're not there's no stress in listening to this at all. No. So I'm listening through the, you know, and like certain albums you pick up from artists and things, and you're just like, which one am I going to just not want to listen to? But I mean, the minute Alone opens up, and this is a long intro, and that's one of the things I like about this album as well is Alone starts with a really long intro, and then End Song, which is the very last song, obviously, has another outro that is just beautiful. So I mean, everything that they did for this encompasses a great album. Again, the melodies, are catchy. You're just sitting there, and at no point during the first listen, at no point was I like, God, I'm losing focus, or I don't want to listen to the song. I am literally glued to listening to this, and that my first impression was like nothing has changed with Robert Smith at all. Like his voice is clear, his voice is strong. You hear his tone, and you know that that's the Cure. So some bands change a little bit over time, and I think some band members have changed, but obviously Robert Smith is the epicenter of the Cure, and nothing changed for me. So that's my first impression was fantastic. It was just beautiful to listen to.
Yeah. And here's the crazy thing. This album took 16 years to make. So between their last album and this one was 16 years. And a lot of bands would have just given up. And I'm always not very optimistic when it comes to the late career albums. So many of the bands I love from the 80s and 90s have put out new material, and it just always seems to miss the mark, whether it's the production or just the songwriting's not as good as it should be. But for this particular album, like you said, as soon as I played it and you start with this, he's going to let you live in these songs before he even starts to sing. And he's still firing on all cylinders. It's every song is taking its time to build. It creates an atmosphere. The mood of the song before he sings the very first lyric. I mean, when the lyrics come in, you're already feeling the emotion that the song's going to bring to you when he finally starts singing. So this album, you can tell he's really just reflecting on mortality. Time is dwindling away, and he's always been reflecting on mortality and time dwindling away. But when he's a 20, 25, 30-year-old singing about it, it doesn't hit the same way as when he's 65 years old and he's looking at, there's still time, but so much of it's disappearing. And it's resonating more for me because, even though I'm not as old as him, I'm just about to hit my 50s, and you feel it different when you're looking at mortality. When you're 20-year-old, you can listen to this album, you can enjoy it, but it's not going to feel quite the same as when you're looking at it like, okay, I can understand where he's coming from now. So you feel that you feel those emotions that he's portraying. And this album just kind of, certain songs I just left feeling shaken because there's just, so much emotion that he pours into these songs. And when we talk about what my favorite one was, the backstory of that song, it just, it can hit you very hard.
Yeah. I almost feel like this is like our generation. Like this was made for our generation. Like, you're right. Like the 20s and 30s and even the teens are going to listen to this, but I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this was a dedication to our generation.
Yeah, like it feels like that.
Yeah, like we know exactly what he's speaking of.
Yeah, the lyrics, you can understand them and you can feel them when you're halfway through your life. You're like, okay, you're listening to it in high school. This album to a high schooler, they're not going to understand it. Although there's songs of loss, there's songs of pain, and no matter how young or old you are, you can feel those emotions. But that staring down mortality, that's something you're not going to get when you're 16.
Yeah. So someone said we're old, for crying out loud, or you're old. I'm 51, yeah. So yeah, I'm old. I'm definitely old.
Yes. So let's see what we got. All right. So he's still upset about Jack White. And then, we're all old. So, so that's my uncle. And I already told him I could have got you those Jack White tickets, but they announced the shows 48 hours before the show, and it was hard enough for me to even pull one. So yes, you're older. We're both old, all three of us, but that's all right. We're still going strong. That's all that really matters.
Right. That's what's matters.
We don't let age scare us off. It's like age is a number, and we're gonna make that number. We're not gonna fight that number. So yeah. Our next thing we wanted to talk about was our favorite track from the album. So what was your favorite track on this album?
Okay, I have top four. There's four in the running, but I will give I think for me, uh I Could Never Say Goodbye is the best track on the album. It's I know, everything's subjective, especially when it comes to lyrics and music and things like that. But to me, it's like, even he wants to give, say goodbye, but he can't. He's like, I can never, and that's the way I read it, is like, or felt it, is like, I'm feeling that like right now with kind of a new career path that I want to go on. I can't say goodbye to it just yet. I want to stay with it. I know it means something a little bit different probably to everybody else, but to me it was just fantastic. It's probably the best song for me on the album.
See, we're in full agreement on that one. I love that song. I mean, the first thing is any song that starts with thunder has automatically hooked me in. I love songs that start with thunder. I mean, that it's one of those things. The Cure have The Same Deep Water as You, which is on Disintegration, also starts with that kind of thunder. And as soon as I hear that, I'm like, okay, I'm hooked. Can you keep me here? And yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful marriage. I mean, the guitar, the piano, they marry so well. And just the heartbreak that's in that song. The story of the song is he wrote it about his brother who had passed away. So you can feel like that loss, that complete pain as he's realizing his brother's not going to be there. He's watching his brother eventually pass away. He's there next to his brother as he's losing his life. And you feel that so much. But as you were saying, it can be applied in so many different ways. It's not only going to, resonate if you're talking about his brother or anyone. It could be your career, but this is one where I was saying even a high schooler could fit with this one because they may have lost somebody. So anyone who's lost somebody or something important to them, this song can resonate with them.
Yeah, I love, like, it's and I know we're going to talk about lyrics, but I want to just touch on a little bit. As lightning splits the sky apart, I'm whispering his name. Like,
yeah, it's just so powerful. And then Thunder, Garth Brooks, Thunder Rolled. Yes, there's one. There's a Thunder song. I just love it. I don't know what it is. And as soon as it started, I'm like, ooh, this is doing it. And then the song continues. You're like, damn, it just managed to be incredible the whole way through. And yeah, that lyric, I mean, I wrote down multiple lyrics from this one too. So we can kind of just jump ahead and talk about some of the lyrics that really grabbed us. And then we can talk about other songs that grabbed us too. Because, as we're talking about the album, we kind of give our final thoughts. So standout lyrics, we'll just jump ahead to that one. So that oh no, that's fine, because I got those right now too. So I also had lyrics from the I Can Never Say Goodbye, and it's hear the bells beyond the sea, it's almost too late. So it's just like, oh man, you feel that pain that he's dealing with as he's realizing he's going to lose his brother. And that I could have written down that whole song as lyrics because just everything about it, you just feel it as you're listening to it. And that's the thing that has always worked with The Cure. I mean, yeah, they have those great pop songs that you hear on the radio, but it's those deeper cuts where you just feel them so deep. We're like, all right, that just stuck me right in the heart. And Robert Smith has always been a master at kind of crafting those kind of lyrics in his songs.
He's definitely a master lyricist. And then I like just that, like, you're right. I like that whole entire song is a poem of, which lyrics are, but it's a poem of hurt and grief, but he's like, but he's still holding on. And we've all felt that, I think, with grief and everything. But another one that it's the, we get into the shadows growing closer now. There's nowhere left to hide. I mean, I'd say that about anybody that you've lost, and because I think that's another reason it did resonate with me, because you're like, he's like, and I don't want to use the cliche terms and things, but he's like speaking for me or speaking through me. And it's just, and again, that's why to me it stood out as the best song.
Yeah, agreed. And that one, I mean, it was one when I was listening to it, and of course I don't know what's coming, but I wrote, this song's going to be hard to beat for my best song. So it's one of those ones where as soon as I heard it, I knew, okay, this is going to be a really hard song to take down, and it didn't. So yeah, it's going to be listening to it on his run along the beach tomorrow. Yeah, it comes highly recommended. It's great, although we kind of gave our overall thoughts. But yeah, this one, you can't go wrong with it. It's just great to listen to it, because when I played it for the first time, I just kind of played it in a nice dark room, phones put away, nothing besides you and that album. And yeah, it's such a good way to experience this album. So yeah, what's another lyric that stuck out to you?
On All I Ever Am, that's another good song. I was back and forth on I Can Never Say Goodbye and All I Ever Am. One of them that really stood out to me, and it's the chorus, the first chorus. He's got two different choruses, and the first chorus is one of the ones that stands out really to me. And I'm just going to kind of read. I lose all my life like this, reflecting times and memories, and all for fear of what I'll find. I just stop and empty out my mind of all the ghosts and all the dreams. All I hold to in belief that all I ever am is somehow never quite all I am now.
Yeah. I mean, so good. This a lyrically amazing album. I mean, just, you could, like you said, you can pick them from different songs, and you just feel what he's feeling. And it's different when you reach 65, I'm sure. I mean, I'm not there yet, but he's just looking back and seeing all the different things. And just the lyrics that caught me were on In Song, and this would have been my runner-up for the best song. And I was thinking, okay, so many albums that you listen to, they kind of front load the good stuff, and then as the album progresses, it just kind of dwindles and you're just ready to skip and be done with it, where this one kind of ends on a high note with a long song. I mean, it's 10 minutes. It takes 5 minutes of intro before we even hear the first lyric. And then the lyric that got me was, and I'm outside in the dark wondering how I got so old. And I wrote in my notes, like, Robert Smith, get out of my fucking head. So it's like, oh man, I feel that one so much, because you wonder, like, all right, what the hell? Do you know, has it really been like, we just had my wedding anniversary and we're having our 24th year married? It's like, we've been married that long. I mean, it's insane to think how time has moved. You know, I've been now teaching for 25 years, and I have students who were in my first class that are in their 30s and have families. And it's just like, where did the years go? And I felt that lyric when he said that. I was like, damn, he is straight in my head right now. Even though he's farther along, you feel that in such a deep way when you've reached a certain amount of years. Like 15-year-old, you're like, yeah, you're old, haha. But no, it's like, no, damn, I'm the old one, and I feel this one.
Yeah, man, In Song, it was hard to pick. Trust me, if you once you listen to this out there in the audience, if you listen to this LP, it'll be hard for you to decide what really is the best song. Like, they're all so good. And I'm at 8 years, David. I'm at 8 years now.
So yeah, that's awesome.
So it was hard for me, but that's what I said. It was like, when you end with a song like In Song, it just encompasses, as you start with Alone and you end with In Song, and you're just like, through the whole album, you're just there. And man, I get goosebumps. If you don't get goosebumps, if for listening to this, if you don't get goosebumps, I ask what you're feeling, because man,
I'm with you. And then he was that's my uncle. He's asking, is it better than No Name? And that they're both really good and both really surprising, because I'll be honest, the last few Jack White albums left me cold. I mean, when he decided he wanted to rap, I was like, oh damn, you just lost me. You know, I'm not here for this. And then with No Name, that would have been one I would have picked for this list, but I've played it like 20 times. So it's one of those ones I've already played it too many times. And the whole rule of this show is we got to go in cold. We can't have heard it even once. So that's what worked for this album, was it was brand new coming out. And I don't know if people tried to find physical copies, but man, were they really hard to find. I mean, I ordered mine from The Cure and actually got it pretty fast, but Amazon was sold out. Every record store in my area was sold out. I mean, it was one of those things where I couldn't find this album anywhere. And that's a great sign. That's saying, okay, it may be their first album in 16 years, but people want to own this thing on physical media. They want to own the record. They want to own the CD, because they were impossible to find. Dash and I are in different states, and we could not find this album. And that's a great sign for the band. That means whatever they ordered wasn't enough. They blew through their orders, and people want more. So it's a great sign for the band. Hopefully this means he's got more songs in him, because I know he said this isn't their final album. But if it were, it would be a great way to go out. Yeah. You always hope you don't go out with those awful late career albums, because I look at a band like Smashing Pumpkins. That's a band I love, but their last few albums have left me so cold, and it makes me sad, because then I'll pull out, you know, Gish, Siamese Dream, Melancholy, and just like, damn, that's how good you were. And now you're this pale reflection of yourself, and it's just depressing. And this album, I always worry, like, okay, it's late career. He's 65. Does he really have anything more to say? And is it going to be worth my time? Because I've tried to listen to the last few Smashing Pumpkin albums, and I haven't made it halfway through. I'm like, I give up about midway through. I'm like, you know, I have better things to do with my time than listen to mediocre songs by bands I love. So I send them packing.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So let's see. We talked about skip tracks. Well, that's one of our categories. So is there a song on this album that you would skip? One that you'd say, you know what? I don't need this one. I'm going to skip it.
Okay. So for this album, I'm going to say there's no skip. I do have a least favorite, but I would still listen to it because it's still a good song. It's just some of the other ones were great. So for me, the one that I least like, but I wouldn't skip it, is Drone No Drone. It just didn't catch me like the rest of them did. Like it's a good song, don't get me wrong. It just like the rest of them were just like you said, when Alone opens up with Thunder and you're, or not with Thunder, but when Alone opens up, you feel that immediately, like he is alone, like the tune and the melody gets you, you know, he's alone, and you feel that. For Drone, I understand what Drone and No Drone, but it just was, you know, and I just didn't catch on to me, and so that was
grab you the same way.
Yeah, and that grabbed me the same way,
and that makes sense. And for mine, I got to pull it out. Mine was War Song. It's not. There's not a song on this album that I would skip, and that's the one problem with vinyl is you're kind of stuck with the song unless you're the master of the needle and you can lift it up and move it, but it ends up being more effort than it's worth. So generally when it's a vinyl album, I'll just let it play. And sometimes you just got to let a song play that you really don't want to hear. This album doesn't have that song. Even though War Song wasn't my favorite song, it's not one I look at, oh, I wish I had a CD so I could press the skip button. I'm happy to let this entire album play. And it comes in, I think it's right around 49 minutes. So it's not an overly long album, because I know some albums you get those, 70, 80 minute albums that maximize every minute on a CD, and you always run into skips on those. It's rare that you'll get an 80-minute album that you want to hear every track of. So this one coming in at a leaner times, under an hour, it makes it so it's easier to not want to skip anything.
Yep. Yeah, it's, and for a in song being 10 minutes, it's still hard for me to believe how short the 49 minutes, you don't even get a full hour out of it. And in song is 10 minutes, 10 to almost like 10 and a half minutes long.
Yeah. And 5 minutes of buildup. It's so funny. And that, like, in song, I love it. I wish they had mixed the drums slightly higher. I want those drums to have a little bit more power, but I still love the song. I just thought that was the one piece of engineering that I wish they had kind of tweaked up. Like, just bring those drums a little higher in the mix. But I'm a drums guy. I mean, that's one thing that hooks me. A good drum album, and I'm all in. So I wouldn't say there's a skipper on this one. I would say listen to it. Just, listen to it and give it the time it deserves. Like any album, sit down and listen to it. I mean, I experienced so many albums on a run in my car, like I was saying earlier, and this one deserves the time sitting down and just letting it completely envelop you. Just let this album take you over, because it's worth it.
Yeah, it's something that I used to call myself, or when I first joined the military, I was like, man, I'm a music lover. And they're like, oh, do you like this? I'm like, no, I turned it off. And he's like, and take this as a grain of salt, take it as you will. You can be a music lover and only like one genre. I totally get it.
Yeah.
But it was one of my old supervisors. He's like, to really appreciate music, you have to listen to every kind of music and understand, because and just like with in song, as soon as that guitar lick kicks in, for you it's the drums, but when that guitar lick kicks, so that he starts strumming and you get in there and it's building you up, and you can actually hear it and you're feeling it build you up. That's when you appreciate the music.
Oh yeah.
And that's what I love about this entire album, because even though I have a least favorite, I still appreciate the music.
Yeah.
And you're right. I just sat back and no distractions, no nothing. I just sat back and I listened, I closed my eyes for a majority of the songs, and you just hear it. And I love it.
Yeah. Agreed. And for me, that was how I did it. I was listening to it. I was sitting on the couch. My wife was in the other room doing homework, and she's like, "Ooh, turn that up. I want to hear it too." So even she just was wrapped up in this album. So it's well worth doing. So this kind of spoiler alert for our next category. Do we want to revisit this album, or are we sending it off to the used bin? So I think we both kind of made it very clear that we'll revisit this one more than once.
Oh yeah, this is definitely on the playlist now. This is definitely like I have tons of LPs now, but I have a certain set that I listen to, and then I'll go and check out some other ones. But I listen to my revisits, and this is definitely going into that slot of on replay, because again, there's once in a generation, I feel like, and again, I'm gonna use cliches because there's nothing better than using cliches, but once a generation, a album comes along, and I feel like this album, as I said earlier, it just speaks to our generation. We've, especially at our age now, we've all probably felt the way that Robert Smith has about a lot of things that he is singing and writing about. And he is a master lyricist and composer, and this is that album. Like it's like a it's our generation's anthem, or this is a whole anthem for us. And so definitely revisit. Definitely,
I agree with that. It's a revisit one for sure. I got the vinyl finally after waiting. I had to experience it the first time on Spotify, and now I bought the actual the half speed mastered vinyl, and finally got to play that. And it's just like, oh my gosh, I want to do this over and over again. And my wife's like, hey, let's play that Cure album again. So even she's hooked and wants to hear more of it, because it's one of those ones that I will come back to a lot. Now I will listen to it on a run. I will listen to it in the car now that I've experienced it for the first time. But the way I'm going to experience it more often than not is playing that vinyl, cranking it up, and, you know, giving that the full volume, shake your living room walls, you know, that I want to give it. So yeah, it's definitely not going to the used bin. It'll be played a lot. I will probably grab this one over a few other different Cure albums that I have. I would think that Disintegration is always going to be the one I reach for. I mean, I love that album front to back. It's a masterpiece. It's perfect. This album gets damn close, and it's surprising. And that label that they always throw at the Cure, best album since Disintegration, for the first time, it's true. I mean, it really is.
I would be surprised if they start saying best album since a Song of the Lost World, Song of a Lost World.
Yeah,
I love Disintegration. You're right. And if you're a creator, whether you're an artist, a writer, a painter, a sculptor, whatever, if you need the mood to be a little bit dark and a little bit melancholy at times, this is the album for you to use as inspiration to create. And like you said, like I'm getting ready and to add it to my my creators playlist for sure. So it'll be in that as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. And yeah, then saying that Exile on Main Street is a great album. It definitely is. I listened to that one for the first time because of the Liz Phair album that she does. She does like a song by song kind of, I wouldn't even say it's an answer to that album, but I listened to that one because of the Liz Phair album back in the 90s. And yeah, it's another great album that you can play from front to back. But of course, where we stand right now, we can't play albums we've heard. So what we're going to be experiencing is albums that we don't know and love already. We may grow to know and love them. Like this one is definitely, it grew on both of us. It, you know, resonated immediately. Now we'll play it, you know, multiple times, add it to our playlist, things like that. But who knows? We don't know what each week's going to bring because they are entirely new. Maybe we know a song or a single from them, because if you go into an album, you may know a single inside and out, but you've never heard one other song from the album. We have a few of those on our list. So let's talk about next week. Next week's Dash's pick, and that is Jethro Tull Stormwatch. And I can honestly say I have not heard one song from this album. So I am going in completely raw. I just got the vinyl. I picked it up off of eBay. So I found that. And next week, we will be taking a look at this album. Same categories. We're going to look at it, evaluate it, see, is this an album we're going to listen to over and over again? Is it, you know, another Jethro Tull classic? Or is it going to be one that maybe we put it right back in the used bin? So we'll see at the end. I haven't played it myself yet. This weekend's homework is to listen to this album, experience it for the first time. And then next week, same time, same place, we will be here. So definitely, if you liked what you heard, like and subscribe on YouTube. If you think we got it completely wrong, drop a comment. Let us know what we got wrong. If we got it right, absolutely, let us know what you loved about this album. And if you think this album is complete trash, let us know why. Let me know what didn't hit for you. So we'll be back this time next week. So please join us on YouTube, on Facebook, and dropping soon on Spotify. You can listen to this. So if you want to listen to this during one of your runs, this will be available on Spotify starting this weekend.
Nice.
All right. So we'll see you next week.
See you next week.